Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 State of E-commerce and Distribution, brought to you by Distribution Strategy Group and developed by my business partner and dear friend, Jonathan Bine. Jonathan, how are you this morning?
Counting blessings, Ian, and you are a big one.
Well, thank you so much. And how many years have we been doing this now?
This is our 13th year.
13th year. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody knows more about what's going on in e-commerce and distribution than you, my friend. You're the world-class, world-leading expert.
Well, I stand on the shoulders of giants, but thank you.
Oh, it's very, very exciting. We got a lot of great material. It's really interesting. Things are changing in e-commerce for distributors. It's really, I think, hitting its stride now. Would you
Mm,
say, Jonathan?
big time.
Good. So let's get started here. First, we got to tell you about a product that we've got in the market that we developed. It's phenomenal. It's called Demand RX, and it helps you estimate end market demand by product category, by customer, or by geography. It uses your data to provide very precise estimates for prospects and customers so that if you want to coach your sales force on where the sales opportunities are, or if you want to understand wallet share or market share, I mean, this is the tool for you. It's been very popular. We have dozens of customers on it. And one of the things you get is this incredible look at wallet share. And you can sit down with your sales reps account by account and say, here's what they should be buying. Here's what they are buying. Here's some opportunities for you to pursue in your upcoming sales calls. And this will plug into major CRMs so that you have the sales reps have the data when they make sales calls. What am I leaving out, Jonathan?
We use your product category. So this example here is from electrical, but imagine your product categories here.
Right. So it's not some generic NAICS code or UNSPSC categorization. It's your categories, the way that you look at the world. Okay, and we've got an event coming up. It's the Profit and Productivity Summit Optimization Strategies for Distributors, November 11th through 13th in Chicago. This is really a deep dive on how to improve distributor profitability. So whether that means improving your gross margins, lowering your cost to serve, understanding how to maximize rebates and co-op, purchasing more intelligently, looking for hidden sources of cash. We have this incredible lineup of speakers. I can't go into any detail right now, obviously, but go to profitandproductivity.com or to distributionstrategygroup.com and look at the top banner and sign up as soon as possible. It's going to be a fantastic event. We're very excited about it. And with that, let's welcome the sponsors who make this content possible today. First, I want to bring in CJ Cartwright, who's a regional account executive with ECI Evolution X. CJ, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what ECI Evolution X can do for distributors?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. If you could go to the next slide for me. And again, I'm CJ with Evolution X eCommerce. We're a B2B e-commerce platform built for distributors with the goal to really not just help provide an incredible tool for your sales team, but really lower the total cost to serve your existing customers. We've been at this over 17 years now, currently have over 500 web stores live globally, serving a number of different industries, which you can see on the right-hand side. Go to the next slide. How are we different? Many e-commerce companies will provide you access to their platform for a subscription. And then it's left to you to figure out how the site is going to get designed, how to integrate the site to your ERP, as well as how to upload, organize, and maintain the content. At Evolution X, we offer a full solution to make the project a success. Our design team is in-house. If you don't have the content, we have numerous means to help you get access to the content that you need. We handle the ERP integration for you with our integration partners, so that your customers can log in on your website, see their contract items, their pricing, their invoice history, and really a lot more. Anything they normally would have to call you for, we want to make that available to them online 24/7 to self-serve. And this is when B2B e-commerce becomes really powerful. Next slide. So if you feel that even 20% of your existing customers would love to have this type of experience from you, take my contact info down here, reach out to us. We'd love to have a deeper conversation and showcase how this platform could transform your business.
Yeah, and if you're just listening to the audio, CJ's email address is ccartwright@ecisolutions.com. And what people are going to see today, CJ, is that e-commerce is becoming very mature and it's table stakes now for distributors. So if you do not have a great e-commerce solution, reach out to Evolution X.
And
Thanks, CJ.
ECI has taken a lot of market share over the last couple of years. We've watched this progress. So kudos to you.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Now we'll welcome in Sandy Leon from Epicor. Sandy, I said this morning during our prep call, I think you've done more of these shows than we have, but we're delighted to have you back. Thank you for joining us on today's program.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here. You can go to the next slide.
It shows the next slide on my screen. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay.
Shoot. Oh man, I'm having issues here.
Oh, that's all right. I'll sing Copacabana while we wait. That might cost us about 3/4 of the audience.
And I'll do interpretive dance. That'll get the last quarter.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell you what slide is on here, Sandy? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, can you jump to the next person?
Yeah, sure. Why don't we come back? That's great. So let's go to you. While you're straightening that out, that's a better idea than the one I had. Let's bring in Justin Johnson from Motivate, serial founder and CEO of technology companies. Justin, we're delighted to have you back. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it. Hi, folks. Simple question here. Why aren't customers buying more online? They use purchase orders. They have Excel files, PDFs, handwritten orders. The e-commerce platforms don't support that. Next slide, please. So we have Motivate eCommerce, the patent pending product. We allow your customers through a widget to drag and drop any of these files into your system to purchase the way they want to. Next slide, please. So how does this work? Simply implement our widget on your site. We integrate with the e-commerce platform. Boom, a customer drags and drops that file. They can also copy text from an email, anything they want. We process, read all that unstructured data. And within seconds, I've got 10 items showing up. Here's the purchase order, handwritten note right inside of it. They can buy exactly how they want to. We've matched the quantity, the unit of measurement, the catalog with your e-commerce platform, right? Then all they do is click the add to cart. It's as simple as that. It takes seconds. We process it, send it into your e-commerce right where they were in that cart. We've got all the content and products right there with your product information system, and they click checkout. Next slide, please, Ian. So game changer. If you want to double online sales, this is the ticket to meet your customers where they're at. Take a picture of this contact details if you can. Send it to me in a text, schedule a Calendly account or meeting or email. We'll get our team to set up. From the folks on this call, we'd love to offer a free POC for a couple days just so you can test it out, but truly a game changer for this industry.
Fantastic. So reach out to Justin Technology Savant Johnson at jj@gomotivate.com. So
Appreciate
Justin,
it,
thanks
bud.
so much. And another
Thank you.
fascinating product that you're putting together. So really appreciate your support of this program. And obviously, if you want to make more of your business digital, it's not just about shopping on a website. It's about finding ways to convert traditional orders into digital orders without people keying them in. Great. Sandy, are you, did you find your slides okay?
I am back. I learned that if I switched my video off, I lose the screen. So anyway, I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go to my second one if that's okay.
All right. I think I'm showing that now, the make, move, and sell.
Yep.
Okay.
So, hey everybody, sorry about that. Epicor is here for the hardworking businesses that make, move, and sell. And when it comes to the move part, your part, we've been in the distribution industry for over 50 years. We know your world, we understand distribution challenges, and at the end of the day, we can help you solve them. In fact, when we ask new customers why they chose Epicor, the thing we hear most often is that we get them, and our software is the best fit for what they do right out of the box. Next one. Today, we're going to hear the results from DSG's State of E-commerce research. How many of you are successfully integrating digital channels into your go-to-market strategy? In our own research, we list integrated e-commerce as one of the top 10 must-have capabilities that distributors need to fully embrace our evolving digital economy. And really, it's not an if anymore, it's more a when, and the when is now. Our integrated e-commerce solution, Epicor Commerce Connect, can be your now, enabling you to increase sales, reach new customers, and shortens your sales cycles. We can help you deploy a website that's intuitive and engaging, but also contains B2B capabilities that allow you to support your customers' procurement processes. As you listen to this webinar and think about your e-commerce plans for 2025, think about Epicor. If you're in the market for new tools to support your growth, we'd love to talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, if you're looking at a new ERP, Epicor has to be on the list and on the consideration set and really high up because it really is designed for distributors. So, and I know you have a tremendous retention rate as well, Sandy.
Yeah, it's like 95%. We love that.
That's incredible. So, all right, Sandy, so much. Thank you so much for joining us again. It's great to see you, and thanks for support of this program.
You bet.
Okay, let me jump ahead. And I'm going to stop sharing and let you share, Dr. Bine.
Okay.
Let's see here. Make sure I don't hit the, there we go.
Looking
I want
good?
to make sure I didn't hit the end webinar button. Instead of,
Yeah.
you might want to go full screen there, my friend.
There you go. Okay. So as Ian mentioned at the outset of the call, this is our 13th round on State of Distributor E-commerce. And we've seen really, really big evolution, big journey over the 13 years. Our survey from this year was conducted in August and September. And we acknowledge there was a little bit of a bias in those who responded. It was primarily those that had e-commerce. Well, it was more of a bias towards those that had e-commerce. It wasn't only those that had e-commerce. So that's one small caveat on our data. About 85% were distributors, 15% manufacturers. Our sectors covered industrial, electrical, safety, HVAC, plumbing, building materials, and others. About almost 80% of the respondents had executive or general management roles. So it was a senior leaning response base. And then in terms of the size of the distributors, about half were less than 50 million, about a third were 50 million to 500 million. And then about an eighth were more than 500 million. So I think our response base this year was slightly tilted more towards the smaller end of the market than in past years. And that will affect some of the numbers that we see. I want to give some definitional backgrounds that we're going to using as background throughout the discussion today. So one is we include e-commerce as website and mobile, but not EDI, punch out, email, fax, etc. We think those other things are important. We'll talk about those. But when we say e-commerce, we mean going through the shopping cart, whether it's from a website or mobile. And when we classify different levels of maturity of a distributor, we talk about nascent, where less than 5% of their revenue is going through the shopping cart. Development stage, 5 to 10%. Mature is more than 10%. And then I would say leadership level is probably 20%. Maybe even, we may even need to lift that where things are now. But we're going to focus mostly on mature and leader as we talk through this discussion. So mature is 10% or more. When we talk about e-commerce adoption, we mean the ability to take an e-commerce transaction on a website. That's what we mean. So if a distributor has adopted e-commerce, that means they can take a transaction. It is not a measure of how much is going through the shopping cart, just Boolean, yes, we can take it, no, we can't. We've looked at about 4,000 individual distributor websites, and we've seen everything from great to good to less than good. Although I should say, the percentage of less than good has decreased year over year, which is a really exciting thing to see. One of the big things that we're seeing when this journey began 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, when people started doing e-commerce and distribution, that was around the time that Amazon was getting big traction and e-commerce was a new word to all of us. There were hopes and expectations about what would happen with e-commerce. And I think what we've seen, and we're going to show in the presentation today, is that what really affects or drives revenue in e-commerce, whether it's an individual company or a sector, and we're going to look at it from a sector perspective, is how complex is the product or the transaction? Things that are more complex products that require value-added services, things that are more complex transactions tend to be harder to put through an e-commerce shopping cart. A really big one is how your customers like to buy. So, for example, certain industrial customers are unlikely to purchase through an e-commerce website. They're more likely to send something through some kind of e-procurement, whether it's a PDF coming to you in an email, or it's EDI, or even punch out. And as much as the industry has focused on getting better product data over the years, has gotten better at marketing, even good at marketing, these three that are highlighted here are really the biggest drivers about whether your e-commerce site's going to be 2%, 10%, 20%, or 30%. As well, things that affect it are, have you done marketing? If you haven't done marketing well, or you don't have good product data, the percentage will plummet that's going through the shopping cart. And then if there is a pattern in your company, as there are in many, maybe even most, of discounts being available offline, that will also drive transactions away from e-commerce. But I think these top three are really big takeaways as you look at what's happening with your e-commerce, as you set expectations with your management. If your customers are used to buying through e-procurement, there's little you're going to do to be able to change them to put their order into your shopping cart.
Yeah, so let's go back for that because there's some nuance here that I think often gets lost, Jonathan. So one is that it's much harder for a distributor to take orders online if they have complex products, complex transactions, right? And we know that there are a lot of customers out there and they're never going to use your shopping cart. They're going to email you a PO because that's how it works in my company. I fill out a PO, I send it to my boss approves it and sends it to you. That your shopping cart just is never going to fit in that process. And I think the discounts available offline is a bigger deal than you do, but we both know that there are many times when customers know that if I call my buddy Joe, who's an inside sales rep, I can get 5 off on a big order, and that I can't do that online, right? So there are all these reasons that drive these orders offline. What's not necessarily true is that that's all a bad thing, right? Because if none of these are true for me, if I've got simple products, simple transactions, my customers aren't buying with POs, they're buying with credit cards, and I don't have better pricing available if you make a phone call, then guess what? My customers are very vulnerable to Amazon Business and Grainger and Global Industrial and other online sellers, because I'm not adding more value. It's not complexity can be your friend when it comes to holding on to market share as a distributor. So yeah, I mean, to some degree, if 90% of your sales are online, you're just by definition more vulnerable to these outside big players than if 10% of your sales are online because your orders are too complicated, right? I mean, who's more vulnerable to Amazon, a packaging distributor where everything's the same on the shelf as when you hand it over to the customer, or a plastics distributor where 85% of the time the plastic is cut and drilled and glued and et cetera before you give it to the customer. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to have this complexity, but it does correlate to how much of your revenue you're going to take through your shopping cart. And so don't assume that you need to eliminate all this complexity, because that might be saving you from exposure to marketplaces.
Yeah, the complexity is a moat.
Yeah, right.
Good. By the way, you just saw the little banter between me and Ian. If you have questions along the way, please be sure to use the Q&A button. We'll try to get them as soon as we can, maybe even in the moment, or we may defer them to a later time in the discussion. We did a little bit of research on manufacturers and their adoption of e-commerce. Ian, over to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is actually becoming better news for distributors. We used to see, when we asked them 5 years from now, how much of your revenue do you think is going to go through marketplaces through distributors? So if you just look at the marketplace lines and the traditional distributor lines, they used to think like 10 points of their revenue was going to come away from traditional distributors and go to other channels. Now it's down to 3, right? So manufacturers are not predicting this very dramatic shift in their own revenues away from traditional distributors anymore. That gap has closed substantially. So while you do see marketplaces growing from a current 5% of the manufacturer's sales to a projected 7%, it's not 5 to 12 or whatever it was anymore. And it's not, traditional distributors aren't going from 60% to 50%. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but just a few years ago, manufacturers were predicting a very dramatic shift in channel revenues away from traditional distributors and towards marketplaces. And they aren't predicting that anymore. Is that fair, Jonathan?
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of it is that distributors are getting better at e-commerce, and I think that they're getting better at telling their stories to manufacturers.
In terms of,
go ahead.
Ian, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of the marketplaces, it's always been Amazon Business and Zoro at the top of the list of where distributors are planning to sell. eBay Business, sort of a distant third. Well, now Walmart.com, I think, bears keeping an eye on, because last year they actually launched something called Walmart for Business. I mean, Walmart's business strategy over the last decade appears to be watch what Amazon does and then do it much later. And they have announced now Walmart for Business. And so that's apparently an attempt to compete with Amazon Business, and it does have a lot of overlap in the feature set. So I think it bears watching to see what happens with them. And then Office Depot with their division Barris is trying to do something similar.
One of the things that we looked at in adoption with manufacturing e-commerce is looking at it by sector. Ian, curious about your observations on what we saw there.
Well, I think it's if it's a finished good and all I have to do is pull it off the shelf and ship it, it's really easy for the manufacturer to do that themselves through their own e-commerce system. As you go to the right, what you see is the products and also the underlying transactions are getting much, much more complex. And it's just harder for manufacturers to sell direct. They need the value-added services that distributors offer. So this is consistent with, everything that we've been talking about over the years, which is complexity can be your friend, because not only do you not find yourself subject to competition from marketplaces and big e-commerce sellers, you're less likely to see direct competition from your own suppliers.
If we take a use case of a safety glove manufacturer, that meets the low complexity, logistic complexity, transaction complexity, very easy for a manufacturer to do. I've encountered any number of manufacturers of safety gloves who are selling direct. And that would be an example that falls in line with what we're showing here.
Yeah, also it's a subset of apparel in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. Yeah, that one kind of jumped out, didn't it? We're going to shift now to what's happening with distributors. As I mentioned, we think that the response base this year was tilted a little smaller. So I think that's affecting the overall number tier. But what we're showing is the revenue going through shopping cart over a 3-year period. 2022, it was on average in our responses just over 9%. 2023, about 10.5%. And then 2024, 12.25%, 12.3%. So it's a material increase year over year, 25% increase from 2022 to 2024. And this is more of that steady getting traction dynamic that we're seeing. On average now, the 12%, the 10% means that the average is a mature site from our definition, meaning 10% or more going through the shopping cart. So this is a sign of arrival and maturity. Not surprisingly, there is a difference in smaller distributors. The 0 to 100 million are at about 10% going through the shopping cart. 100 million to more than $1 billion is at 16%. So they have been at it longer. They've applied more resource to it, and they're having more going through their shopping cart.
So before you go on, we do have a question from Caleb. How should a distributor evaluate what is realistic revenue via their B2B? I think he means via their website.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to show benchmarks of different industry segments. But I think it would go back to that transaction complexity, product complexity, how customers like to buy. Those are going to be big determinants along with the secondary ones as well. But I'm going to show benchmarks of what that looks like by industry. And maybe if Caleb wants to share the particular industry they're in, if that's not part of our data, then I can get back on that. In terms of the adoption, shifting to the adoption, so adoption has slowed pretty significantly, particularly above 50 million. There is more adoption now for distributors below 50 million. There's a lot of platforms. If we go back to when we first started doing state of distributor e-commerce, there were really 3 e-commerce platforms of any prominence at that time. Today, I could probably come up with 20 different platforms for e-commerce and distribution, and that has lowered the cost and made it more accessible for that the distributors under 50 million. One caveat here, by the way, it is possible that we have undercounted, particularly at the upper end of the market, some adoption. So when we go to look at these websites, we look to see if there's e-commerce on that site. We'll also look to see if their e-commerce is pointing to another site. It's possible we missed some of those. So we may be undercounting the upper end of the market. But the lower end of the market is what's growing. If we look at this from a technology adoption lifecycle perspective, we're really approaching the late majority stage of adoption overall, and that's really significant. There are certain sectors that are starting to get more traction. ECI is pushing a lot in the gas and welding sector, so we expect to see that moving. The belting sector, that is starting to get traction. These are somewhat later sectors that are starting to get going, but in general, the adoption has slowed significantly.
Yeah, so we've Kelly, who's got an interesting point of view. I won't read all of it, but when she says, when it comes to the mid-sized distributors who tend to be competing, sort of all along the food chain, they've got some local big customers and they've got some small accounts, but they haven't necessarily invested in, punch out and integration, and the content's not great on their site. Meanwhile, you've got the big box and the destination sites, I would say like Grainger, they've been in e-commerce from the beginning to own that space. So her statement is, it's almost too late for most distributors at this point if they haven't gotten started. And it's hard not to feel that to some degree, isn't it, Jonathan?
Well, I would say yes and no. Let me jump ahead a couple slides here that show. This slide here is showing on the horizontal axis, the x-axis maturity. Each one of these is an individual distributor or respondent. So this is the percentage going through the shopping cart. This is the year the initiative launched. I can tell you, the R squared on this thing is terrible. I mean, there's almost no correlation. I ran a Pearson correlation. You see companies starting in the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, and they're at 20, sometimes 30%. Here, probably a pure e-tailer or almost pure e-tailer. When we ran this analysis a few years ago, the companies that had been in it longer were more successful at it, but there's so much advance in the technology. The new platforms are leapfrogging some of the older platforms. There's so much more know-how. There's so much better product data as a result of group initiatives that companies that really apply themselves can get up and running quickly. I don't think they're locked out. I think the cost to pull that off is actually lower than it was a number of years ago. So,
but move fast.
They have to move fast. That's right. That's right. Now, if we start to look at it by sector, on the vertical axis, we're showing maturity. Again, that's revenue going through the shopping cart. And then horizontal axis is adoption. A couple of things jump out. First, that Janssen and electronics are very, very high adoption and maturity. And this makes sense. I mean, Jansen has very simple transactions generally. I mean, even if somebody's buying CapEx equipment, that could be a simpler transaction than in other environments. The logistics are simple for Jansen, same thing for electronics. So those continue to be in that upper right end of the graph. Other opposite end of the graph, building materials construction. This has been a bit of a laggard in terms of adoption. It's showing it at about 20% now. And that's up, by the way, but it's been a bit of a laggard. There are specific challenges with building materials construction in terms of the product content, the nature that a lot of building material product has a very local flavor. There's different challenges with building materials construction, but we see that it is, it's running neck and neck in terms of maturity. Those that are doing it with industrial, with plumbing, with hardware, with HVACR. So that's a shift in the last couple of years, is to see the maturity in the building materials construction space.
And for Caleb, who's replied that he's in the industrial and fluid power distribution space, we would say that adoption should be around about 30% of firms have adopted e-commerce, meaning they have that functionality. And those that do are seeing about 13% of revenues going through e-commerce. Is that the right way to say it?
Although I would say this may be a little bit more on the industrial supply side of things than the industrial equipment side of things. So we might expect slightly different numbers on the equipment for Caleb than we would for the industrial supply.
Slightly lower.
Probably lower, yes.
Yeah.
Right. One of the interesting ones is if you just think about, so electrical has put huge effort in terms of product content. There have been multiple group initiatives just banging on product content, product data for a probably 8 or 10 year period now. And there's been a lot of money put into it by electrical distributors buying enterprise class platforms, yet it lags HVACR and plumbing. And that has been true for several years. This goes back to that. What are the buying processes like? What is the complexity like in the one sector versus another? So for electrical, if it's an industrial end customer, it's coming out of their procurement system. It's not going into your shopping cart. And if you are doing an electrical project, it's also probably not going into your shopping cart. The way people buy there and the nature of what they do lends itself less to shopping cart than plumbing or HVAC. I'll give you one other way to think about this, which is you probably have a hard time recalling the last time you had an electrical contractor to your house. It might literally be when your house was built, if you have been in the house that long. By contrast, you can remember the last time you had a HVAC or plumbing person in your house.
Yeah, there's just more service
business.
Yeah, there's a lot more service business, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah.
We got a few comments. One, Amit says the golden rule is to understand your customers and what drives them and helps them. And yeah, that's why e-commerce isn't the whole story, right? I mean, a website that is just very useful to customers for a variety of reasons can still have tremendous impacts on drawing customers and creating customer loyalty, et cetera. So this e-commerce adoption is sort of a proxy for having a good website. Kara's asking, when you talk about percentage of revenue, do you know if that's total revenue or excluding projects? I think it's total, isn't it, Jonathan?
It's whatever's going through the shopping cart. I would presume that very small portion of projects are going through the shopping cart.
I think she means are you dividing that into total sales for the distributor, or are you taking out the project sales for the distributor?
Total sales. Total sales.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. And then Catherine wants to know if these slides will be shared. Yes, they will be shared, so you will have access to them.
Another look at the growth in different percentage bands. So the mature band is that 10%. And over a 4-year period, we've gone from about a quarter to just over 40%. That's really supporting that almost late majority type of phenomenon. If we look at it from the perspective of those that have at least 20%, so leadership, that's that red line here. So that's gone from 13% to almost about 23% over a 4-year period. That's really substantial revenue. You know, at 10%, you've figured out how to take a transaction, you've figured out how to do some things with e-commerce. When you're getting to 20%, you've clearly got your marketing down, your demand generation. You may be doing things differently with inventory for e-commerce. I mean, you've invested significant effort in making that happen. And so to have almost a quarter that are above 20% is significant.
Yeah.
Those that are getting to above 30%, that's a slower growth, going from 8% in 2021 to 11% this year. Notable though was that about an 8 or 12 or 12.5% of plumbing, safety, and industrial are above 30%. So these are really terrific success stories for distributors that are doing them. When we looked at how distributors are driving demand, this is one of the things that distributors have control over. They don't have control over the buying processes or the transaction or product complexity. They do have control over how they market. And there's been a very steady journey to create true marketing competence for distributors. One of the things that we've seen over the last several years is that for driving demand, it turns out that your people, meaning your field sales reps, your true customer service reps, your outbound telesales reps, they actually have the biggest effect on driving e-commerce demand. But what's happened in the last 2 years is that the gap between the role of people and the role of digital meaning email marketing, SEO, pay-per-click, marketing automation, that gap has narrowed tremendously. As we've come into this decade, as we've come through COVID, a lot of people had a trial by salvo with their whole digital and e-commerce initiatives. They were forced to get better at the digital methods over these periods. And we see in particular here, SEO is 22% rated that as the most effective. So that's the third most effective thing. And that makes it more effective than the inside sales rep or email marketing. Things that remain less effective are basically print, whether it's your print catalog or direct mail, and even social media. I think when a lot of people started getting going in e-commerce, they had these big hopes for social media, but you see here, it's rated as the least effective, or fewer people describe it as the most effective than any other way of driving e-commerce demand here. So then we also looked at what people are trying to get done and in terms of the operational objectives. The one that really stood out was, again this year, improving the ease of use, the customer experience, the user experience. And so while the ranking of these objectives was similar to last year, the intensity with which people are focusing on UX, CX, the intensity with which they're focusing on getting the internal efficiencies from e-commerce, and then finally ERP integration, that really jumped ahead this year. So it's really burnishing your game with e-commerce when you're focusing on these three things. In terms of the financial objectives, we looked at whether people were trying to do things in market, are they trying to do things in existing geographies, existing segments, existing customers, prospects. And what comes back from the financial objectives is that people are trying to grow revenue with new customers in existing geographies. The existing geographies piece didn't quite fit onto the screen here, but growing revenue with new customers in existing geographies is significant. Prior to this year, growing revenue with existing customers really topped the growing revenue with new customers in existing geographies. So yet another sign of the maturity that, yeah, we've checked that box of we're focusing on existing customers. We're doing that well. We're now starting to say, how do we use pay-per-click? How do we use SEO, potentially email marketing or marketing automation to reach other customers in our existing markets? As you can see at the right here, expanding business in new geographies, expanding into new customer segments, not as much appetite for those. Those are much, much harder problems. And I think this is another piece of when people started doing e-commerce, they were thinking, great, I'll just start selling out of my geography and I'm gonna try to be like Jeff Bezos. And maybe 1% of the companies were successful in doing it. That means 99% were unsuccessful. It's a hard thing to do. And I think these new, what's showing up here in the objectives reinforces this idea of focusing on existing market, now starting to focus on prospects in your existing market.
So a couple questions, Jonathan. So do you find that the e-commerce platform is effective in winning new business, or is most of the revenue driven by existing customer transactions? I mean, since the objectives seem to be oriented more towards new customers, but I think most of the existing revenue is coming from existing customers, isn't it?
Oh, for sure, it's mostly coming from existing customers. But the fact that distributors are starting to get revenue from what were new customers, what were formerly prospects, is significant. It means their program is growing in scope. Most of the e-commerce platform vendors will tell you that they do things that enable better SEO in terms of what the search engines can see, and SEO is essentially more of a mask technique than email marketing or marketing automation. Those are direct techniques, right? So when you think about your existing markets, a lot of what your existing customers, a lot of it has a direct flavor. You've got several thousand and maybe a few tens of thousands of customers. You draw a circle around those and you market to them directly. But as you start to go beyond that known customer base, then the mask techniques play a larger role, including the SEO and the pay-per-click. So.
All right. And someone else is asking, I'm in the cable and wire industry. People are still preferring to call their account manager and have a CSR enter the order instead of purchasing online. I'm curious how the field sales rep is driving e-com for other companies.
For companies where the rep is still comped either way and is feeling secure about their job, and that's not all of them, by the way, they understand that it's easier for them and or easier for the customer that it goes through the shopping cart. In some cases, there are spiffs given to field sales reps to get people to do things on e-commerce.
Right.
So I think it's a cultural thing that makes that work or not. I think another piece that's interesting here is the highest priority is growing the number of orders. The lowest priority, or almost lowest priority, is increasing the transaction size. We've worked with some distributors who are really good at SEO, who maybe would list SEO as a core competence in the top 5 competences of the company. And what happens for companies that are really good at SEO is that they overgenerate the wrong kind of customer. They could generate DIY customers, do-it-yourself customers. Those customers tend to do very, very small orders. I think there is generally a transaction size issue in a lot of e-commerce. A lot of distributors are finding they're getting smaller orders. In your own business as a distributor at what point an order is profitable. And a lot of these would probably fall below what you would consider to be a profitable order. So it's curious to me that the distributors are focused on growing the number of orders way, way more, 4 to 1, over increasing the transaction size. So. A couple of other things that we saw. We asked about the satisfaction of the e-commerce investment. How satisfied are you with the ROI you've gotten on e-commerce? And we asked this year over year. This year, about a quarter of the people who responded were either extremely or very satisfied versus 17% in the prior year. More evidence of, this stuff is getting traction and is really, really going. What we noticed about those who are highly satisfied with e-commerce was that, first of all, they had higher e-com revenue, 17% versus the 12% overall. They had a very strong focus on growing in existing markets with customers and prospects. And they were very focused on that UX CX piece. Of course, all of them have integrated with the ERP. So this started out a few years ago, I think maybe at about 10 or 12% total were highly satisfied. So that's really, really, really come a long way. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to you, Ian, to talk to our audience about this concept of the e-commerce assist.
Yeah, look, I mean, the e-commerce side a lot of times doesn't actually take the order. Sometimes it generates an order that comes from their channel, and both are good. So we equate it to what a point guard does in the NPA. So these NBA, geez Louise. Anyway, so if you look at Chris Paul and Steph Curry, both very successful point guards, you'll see that Steph Curry is more likely to take the shot. Chris Paul is just as likely to pass the ball as he is to shoot the ball. And in the end, they both produce almost identical the number of points as of a couple of years ago anyway. And so what we learn here is that it's okay to design your website and build capabilities of your website that are designed to drive the order to another channel. And in fact, we think it's really important to separate you're thinking about the shopping of the order and the placing of the order. So shopping versus buying. And when you do that, you'll start building a website that's different. And is designed to help customers shop effectively no matter how they intend to place the order. And of course, this will fundamentally transform your ROI, because if you're only looking at what goes to the shopping cart, you're severely undercounting the real revenue generated by your website, sometimes by a factor of 6, 7, 10 to 1. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jonathan, this, if you really want to do a full-fledged ROI, and this is something that you guys did for an electrical distributor a while ago, if all you did was look at the shopping cart revenue, you would think that this distributor is upside down in their ROI for their website. But if you just estimate that if you just look at the top 3 deciles of your customers and say, 5% of their revenue was driven by the website, because there's a lot of shopping on there. And you guys did some pretty serious analytics where you looked at just the pages that were product pages. You didn't look at anything else. And you correlated the customer's actual behavior on the site to what they later purchased. And there are various ways you can go about this. So this is just one type of analysis. What you discovered is that it was very easy to get to an over 600% ROI with extraordinarily conservative assumptions about what the website was really contributing to these customers' total sales online and offline. I mean, we wrote a whole paper about this. You can find it on our site or reach out to us and we'll send it to you. But the main takeaway here is your shopping cart revenues are probably the smallest part of all the revenues generated by your website. And we have suggestions for how you can go and estimate what the total is of your offline revenue that's attributable to your website. But if you're basing your investment decisions and your assessment of your website's value based on what's going through the shopping cart, you're bringing a B2C measurement to a B2B world, because B2B is just totally different. And a lot of people wind up shopping online, but then buying offline through email or phone calls or whatever. And so for this one distributor, when we estimated, like, okay, if only 5% of their offline revenues were attributable to the website, they had this 600% ROI. If it was 15%, that is 1600% ROI. But there was, almost no case where a little bit of offline revenue didn't make it a very attractive and positive number. And this justifies further investment into your digital capabilities. So you really have to get this right. We've done webinars on just this topic. We have a lot of material on it we can send you, but your takeaway from this conversation should be stop using the shopping cart revenues as the the measurement of your sales through your website because it's wrong and it's wildly understated almost no matter what. And there are ways to get to a better number that shows you what your real ROI is. How's that, Jonathan?
I think it's great. And we do this also for PVF distributor. And again, similar thing, they were showing less than 1% going through their shopping cart. By the traditional metrics, these would be considered unsuccessful. But by this new ROI measurement, their e-commerce sites were generating huge amounts of value. And a lot of it depends on what you consider an assist. By the way, in basketball, probably in hockey as well, what is considered an assist is somewhat subjective, right? So you could decide that 5% of the stuff related to product pages is considered an assist. You could decide that 2%. Whatever you decide is an assist, you'll probably find that it's generating a lot more value than you knew. And I think one of the big takeaways was that these digitally engaged customers, those that visit the websites, they buy way more online and offline than customers that are infrequent visitors to your website. So larger customers tend to be more digitally engaged. It does correlate to customer size, meaning if it's large customer to you. So they need to have a robust shopping and account management capability, even if there's not much going through the shopping cart. Let's come back to this big idea that we mentioned at the outset or earlier in the call, which is that the things highlighted in bold here are really gating items on how much is going to go through the shopping cart. As Ian mentioned, this is not a bad thing. It's just something to recognize as you look for where your revenue is going to come, and it may end up coming through this e-commerce assist that Ian just outlined so brilliantly. That being said, other things that are going to affect how much e-commerce revenue you have are how good your marketing capability is. People learned early and often, build it and they will come does not work here. You have to bring Muhammad to the mountain. Is that how the expression goes, Ian?
I think you bring the mountain to Muhammad.
Oh, the mountain to Muhammad. Okay. You have to bring the horse to water.
There we go.
So you have to get that marketing in place. You have to have good product data. The group initiatives are really yielding great value, whether it's through, a buying group or an association or some other group of people where there's more than just one of you that are hitting on the data. Okay, so then I guess the key points here is that there are significant differences between these segments in terms of the drivers. Another piece is that we do a lot of work on customer experience, measuring customer satisfaction. One of the things that we've seen in that data is that e-commerce is less important. A easy to use website, which includes e-commerce, is less important and it's lower satisfaction than most other things that you do for your customers. We've seen a few exceptions where e-commerce is really important and people are really satisfied with it. Our understanding of this data is that for many customers, e-commerce is now table stakes, meaning you have to have it. It's going to be tougher to differentiate on it. You could decide, hey, we're going to be the go-to place in a given sector. So, we talked about the belting sector. You could decide to become the go-to place that people come to for belting, even if they don't end up buying from you. Or you could decide to become the go-to place in gas and welding. These are emerging sectors for e-commerce, but in general, it's harder to differentiate. Now, the presence of an e-commerce site does not guarantee differentiation. The maturity rate, meaning the percentage going through the shopping cart, looks like it will grow faster than adoption over the next few years. These things have a direction. We can play them out at that pace, and that maturity will grow faster. A big thing is that whether you're in one of these high potential sectors or not, high potential for a shopping cart, there is no substitute for a great customer experience, great user experience to facilitate that shopping, to bring them there in the first place. And then We really strongly believe in this idea of complementing with the alternate channels. If people don't want to buy from your shopping cart, they want to shop on your site, but they want to buy somewhere else, let them do that how they want to do that, whether it's EDI punch out or email order automation. Finally, as you manage expectations within the organization, you need to expand the website ROI definition to incorporate sales generated from the e-commerce site that don't go through the shopping cart.
Fantastic. Okay, I hope that was useful for you. We have another program coming up that I want to tell you about. Hold on for 1 minute, please. On October 9th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, we'll be doing a distribution leader panel on how distributors use AI today. We got representatives from 3 different companies, Vertical Systems, Wesco, and Porter Pipe and Supply. That's sponsored by Inforce Bureau and us. So please join us on October 9th. Put it on your calendars. We'll see you there. Jonathan, fantastic job as usual. Thank you so much for putting all this great content together. It was a pleasure working with you. And we'll see you on the next program from Distribution Strategy Group. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.